Venus and Saturn combinations. This is one of those combinations that does have the potential to be a hidden blessing for individuals. And why is that? Well, Venus and Saturn tend to like each other, tend to get along. Venus and Saturn tend to give a very realistic view of love. And what's the thing that causes us most problems in life but our unrealistic expectations about things? And when do these occur? Well, it's going to be when Venus and Saturn are together in the same sign. You might find it occurring as well if Venus and Saturn are exchanging signs, if they are mutually planetarily aspecting each other, graha aspecting each other. Or if you find Venus in the sign of Saturn, Capricorn and Aquarius, or Saturn in the sign of Venus. We can see this happening on some level with each of these combinations, but most of the time you're going to find them when they're together in the same sign. It's going to be a little harder on Venus. The most beneficial way of having Venus-Saturn combinations to have that real sense of blessing as we've described is when we get Venus and Saturn not in the same sign but mutually aspecting each other. Now let's consider this. Why is this good? Why is this bad? It can be bad because it can delay a person's capacity to feel love and to develop love within their life and have a long-term committed relationship. It can delay it. That's number one. It can be bad because it can make a person focus, and this is typically true when we have Venus and Saturn together in the same sign. A person can see everything that's wrong with their love life, but they're not able to see what's good with their love life, or the things that they love. It doesn't have to just be your love life, just anything that you love and are devoted to. There's an overemphasis on, look at all these problems. How can I even enjoy this when all this is going wrong? And that's what Saturn does. Remember, he looks down. His gaze is down, so all he can see are the problems of the love. It can be bad in the sense that the person might have to work hard in their love life, in their relationships, and for the things that they love. And most of the time we want that to be just easy and natural, where we don't have to put any attention to it at all. But again, that's a little unrealistic, because in the long run, the relationships that work out for a longer period of time are those that have the realism of Saturn, that says, I know you've got problems, I know I've got problems, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, but we're going to do our best to support each other despite what goes wrong. Assuming we don't do anything too terrible to the other person, because that's, not necessarily acceptable. Saturn and Venus are good together because it can give a person a greater appreciation for the love that they do have. Think about the people that are always in relationships. They can just jump from one dating scene to another. They never really appreciate what they have with another individual. They're just always moving on. But with Venus and Saturn, the person appreciates the fact that anyone loves them at all, and they're able to appreciate all those little things that the other person does that supports the relationship. So that's why it makes relationships typically occur a little bit later in life when we're more mature, or it allows us to appreciate that relationship as we become more of an adult. And when do we typically become as much of an adult as we're going to be? It's probably going to be after your Saturn return. That's generally speaking. Venus and Saturn, as I mentioned, gives stability to relationships, which a lot of people find boring. So if you're a relationship junkie, like potentially a Venus-Rahu person, where you easily get bored and feel like you need to find something better, you're not going to like Venus-Saturn people, because they're going to be stable. They're going to have the idea of doing the hard work necessary to make the relationship work. When Venus and Saturn are good, the person is able to endure the difficulties of relationships. How many people do you see that get in relationships and 5, 6, 7, 10 years in, all the little problems have built up and they just can't handle it anymore. They can't handle all the little things that drives them nuts about their partner or their relationship, and they have to leave. They don't realize that you need to work on those things as they come up consistently, slowly over time. So Venus and Saturn gives a lot of durability when it's working well, when they're in good dignity and supporting each other in that regard through Logitati Avashtas, because they're able to bear the burdens that allow them to make the relationship work, because every relationship is going to have a burden in that regard. Other difficulties with Venus and Saturn. A person might be afraid of love, might be too detached in love, might make love a mechanical thing, right? Saturn kind of squeezes the life out of that Venus. They can be aloof in love, right? They cannot feel like it's good for them to be open with another person in their love life, which can also cause issues. Since Saturn deals with hard work, a person might not feel that the hard work is necessary to have love in their life. That's the kind of person where their partner says, hey, let's go to a counselor and let's spend 1.5 years really hashing this stuff out. The person says, well, if it's going to be that hard, I don't want to do it, and they'll go into another relationship and it still won't work out well. And eventually with Saturn and Venus, the person needs to kind of get with the picture of the fact that they eventually have to do the hard work to make the relationships work, no matter who they're with. Since Venus also deals with luxury, wealth, and beauty, physically a person might have a kind of detached sense of beauty, an aloof sense of beauty, a coldness to their beauty. When it comes to wealth and luxury, Venus and Saturn doing well, the person might work hard and be dedicated to bringing luxury in their life, to working hard to beautifying their home or beautifying themselves or beautifying the world around them. On the other hand, if Saturn and Venus are not so good, the person may not feel it's worth it. They might not want to work so hard to do those sorts of things, and therefore they don't have lovely things in their life. That's when Venus and Saturn create ugliness versus the possibility of the hard work of creating something of lasting beauty, which is a very Venus-Saturn combination. So think about it this way. Venus and Saturn can go two ways. It can give you lasting luxury and wealth and beauty through hard work and determination. It can give you lasting love through doing all those little small things you need to do that make a relationship work well. Or it can give ugliness because the person doesn't care to take care of themselves. It can give lack of wealth and lack of luxury, again, because the person doesn't want to do the hard work required by Saturn to have those beautiful things. That's why when you meet certain people who work hard to have beautiful things, right? And they get them because they've worked hard. And they meet someone else, maybe a friend or a coworker or whatever, who doesn't necessarily do that or think that way. And then that friend or coworker has a sense of jealousy towards the other person, when really the other person worked for it. It's not that it was just given to them. They worked for it, so they appreciate it. They appreciate beautiful things that they work hard for. Same things with the relationships. If a person isn't willing to work hard, then most of the time the relationships aren't going to work long term. It's always the key is long term. They'll fall apart at some point. So bear this in mind when you're thinking about these Venus-Saturn combinations. Now, Saturn deals with uglier things, dead things, and so on. So a person might have, or it also deals with land and property. Remember, cruel planets, malefic planets deal with physical property-related things. So when we get Venus and Saturn, oftentimes a person will have land. They'll own land and they'll beautify it. Or they'll benefit from minerals from below the earth, like coal or oil or so on. They'll have wealth in that regard. Or even things like iron. Or they might have a love of antiques, old things, beautiful things from another era. In the same way that Venus and Saturn, if well situated, can give a relationship with an individual who is older than you. And they usually say, 7 years or so on with Saturn, 7 years or older. So a love of older people, relationships with older people can often occur with these Venus-Saturn things. And that's because it'll give a love who is more mature, a partner who is more mature. And Venus and Saturn typically, when they're working well, have a strong sense of maturity about love and relationships. So in a way, it's a little bit opposite what we would typically see with a Venus-Rahu combination. So Venus-Rahu people could benefit by learning from probably a healthy Venus-Saturn person. Okay, so I think this is enough on Venus and Saturn. You get the idea.